Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, I've said it here many times before. The most interesting part of the Epstein story had very little to do with him or even with the paltry charges brought against his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell. In many cases, it didn't even really have to do with his intimate relationships with high-level billionaires like Bill Gates and Leon Black. It always had to do with two things: who was he working for and who was he working with? The for part is one that we still don't know, although there are many suspicions around his connections to Israeli or U.S. intelligence, but the who he was working for with question is one where there seemed at the least a small chance of potentially learning the truth. The most insight came into this question, largely from court documents and financial records relating to Epstein's financial dealings with two major U.S. banks. How did he get all this money in the first place? And then also, what was he using it for? We're getting a small glimpse into just how much was at stake with the latest news that JPMorgan has decided to pay nearly $300 million to settle Epstein accusers' lawsuit against the largest bank in the U.S. and one of the largest in the world. The details of the settlement are stunning. JPMorgan agreed to pay the historic sum for a sex assault case hours after a federal judge ruled that dozens of women abused by Epstein all had standing to join the lawsuit against JPMorgan. That ruling could have opened up JPMorgan to even more discovery evidence that has already been released about the relationship to Epstein, and it reveals just how deeply enmeshed the bank was in his financial machinations even after he became a convicted sex offender. Already, court documents show that JPMorgan was aware of shady stuff going on with Epstein, including compliance officer who said, quote, "There's lots of smoke, lots of questions about Epstein," and another which referred to him as a, quote, "sugar daddy." The documents released so far also show that the bank was fully aware he was a convicted sex offender and continued to do business with him. One of the most damning revelations was that the current head of JPMorgan's $4 trillion asset and wealth management business visited Epstein properties in the past and was aware of problems around him in multiple meetings. Furthermore, internal documents show that lower-level employees filed multiple suspicious activity reports on Epstein that were ignored. The number of employees flagging suspicious activities numbers, quote, nearly 4 dozen, showing just how pervasive knowledge within the bank was. One of the real tells within the revelations was that two senior executives at the bank advocating for keeping Epstein's business despite his sex offender guilty plea because Epstein was seen as a conduit to other super rich clients that he could bring in. It's also no coincidence the settlement comes just 2 weeks after Jamie Dimon himself sat for 7 hours of testimony over Epstein. All of this is even more twisted by the fact that JPMorgan is actually suing one of its own former employees, James Staley, who was for a time the CEO of Barclays, another massive financial institution. JPMorgan said that if the bank does have to pay, it should be Staley who pays, even though he doesn't even work there anymore. They allege that he concealed all of the worst Epstein behavior from the bank and the compliance office. Will this doesn't exactly pass scrutiny, it's likely Staley is the fall guy. He was, though, caught exchanging very gross emails objectifying young women with Epstein. The email in question showed him emailing Epstein after visiting his private island, saying, quote, "That was fun. Say hi to Snow White."
Ugh.
I'll let you decide how to interpret that one. The maddening part with this entire case, after covering it for 4 years, is that each one of these stories is another piece of the puzzle. One of the first clues into how vast the conspiracy was the early 2020 Deutsche Bank fine by New York State authorities. That and a recent settlement by the bank showed that the victims showed a same culpability. A bank that knew he was a convicted sex offender and knew he was tripping all sorts of crazy compliance tripwires and continued to do business. So, where do we even go from here? It's a good question. Maxwell's behind bars. No client list ever really came out. We get some dribble here, and then a high-level meeting with people like Bill Gates or Noam Chomsky. But let's be honest, it never really goes anywhere. This JPMorgan lawsuit was a real opportunity to get things out there so that it's no surprise that they're paying more than $250 million to keep it quiet. The next and perhaps only hope is the ongoing lawsuit between the U.S. Virgin Islands and JPMorgan, which remains active. JPMorgan is fighting this case harder because it alleges that the U.S. Virgin Islands, where many of these sex crimes took place, are actually the ones responsible because of their possible cozy relationship with Epstein by past government officials. The Virgin Islands, on the other hand, they say JPMorgan is the financial nexus of Epstein's abuse empire and was the main conduit for much of the money that changed hands, which he used to fly women around around and to himself, to abuse and to then be abused by others who visited him. We'll see if either of them even make it to trial. We get even more information, but sadly it does feel like things could be winding down there too. The more that they settle and the bigger the dollar amounts, the more of an admission how explosive the truth is, and it shows us why we should keep pushing. Somewhere, on some server somewhere, there is a lot of damning evidence for a lot of very rich and powerful people. All of us know it's true. We just need the confirmation, and to not stop until any of it actually comes out for good. So there you go, Crystal. I mean...
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.